the medical aspect of the crucifixion. Isaiah 52:14 says, "Just as many were astonished at you, my people, so his appearance was maimed more than any man, and his form was more maimed than any man, and his form more than any sons of man." Jesus Christ was beaten, flogged, tortured, and ultimately died a criminal's death on the cross. He did this to free the world from sin. Sinless means free from or without sin. Jesus was perfect and blameless, yet died a criminal's death on the cross. The scourging. Before Jesus was crucified, he was scourged. He was stripped naked and chained to a post, with his arms stretching above his head. As the whipping continued, it cut deeper into his tissue, exposing the bloody mass of muscle and bone. Extreme blood loss occurred, and during the beatings, the flesh may be ripped off, and the bones would literally fly out of the body. The crown of thorns. They put a crown of thorns on his head. The thorns were 2 inches in length, and the soldiers then violently jabbed the crown into his scalp as they continued to beat him on the head. With each violent hit, they drove the thorns deeper into his head. As the thorns pierced his vascular tissue, Jesus began to bleed profusely from the wounds inflicted on him. The robe. The soldiers then became tired of their own cruel joke, so they ripped the robe off of Jesus. By this point, the robe had become attached to the clots of blood and serum in the wounds, and removing it caused excruciating pain. The wounds had become reopened, and he began to bleed again. The cross. After he was scourged and beaten, the soldiers told him to carry his cross. The cross is believed to weigh about 200 to 300 pounds. The crossbar alone weighed 80 to 110 pounds. Via Dolorosa, way of suffering. Jesus couldn't carry his own cross at this point, so they asked Simon of Cyrene to do it. The cross had been previously used and was made out of rough timber. The cross was laid across Jesus' bleeding shoulders. Once the cross was laid on the man, they made this slow, painful journey through the narrow streets made of stone. And Jesus fell down continually and couldn't finish, so Simon carried it for him. The street today is known as Via Dolorosa, or the Way of Suffering, which led to Golgotha, where he was crucified. Nailed to the cross. Jesus was quickly thrown backwards with his bare and bleeding shoulders against the wood. The soldiers then felt for the small, weak area at the wrist. Then they pounded a square wrought nail through the wrist and deeply into the wood. The soldier was careful not to pull the arms too tightly to allow some movement. Crucifixion, one of the most shameful, painful ways to die, was considered a method of capital punishment for their day, and Romans would crucify other Romans, only foreigners that were accused of treason. The act of crucifying was always done in public, and often the cross was at eye level so that people in the crowd could spit and mock at them, Along with pure physical brutality, victims would bake in the sun or freeze in the cool of night on their way to certain death. Often they would lose control of their bodies, and at the foot of the cross would be urine, blood, sweat, tear, and feces. The victim would often experience blood loss and dehydration. Excruciating literally means from the cross. As Jesus was on the cross, he pushed himself up for air. He had to place his full weight on the nail through his feet. He experienced searing pain as the nail tore through the nerves between the metatarsal bones of his feet. As his arms grew tired, great waves of cramps came over the muscles and knotted in deep throbbing pain. When these cramps overcame his, he was no longer able to push himself upward. Since he was hanging by his arms, his pectoral muscles were paralyzed. Air could be drawn into the lungs but could not be exhaled. He fought to raise himself to even get one short breath. Finally, the carbon dioxide level in his lungs and bloodstream increased, and the cramps were partially delayed. Often the lack of oxygen would cause the victim to fall in and out of consciousness. This may last for hours or days. Jesus suffered hours of relentless pain, cycles of twisting cramps that had engulfed his joints, and intermittent partial asphyxiation. There was excruciating pain as the tissue was continually torn from his lacerated back due to his up and down movements against the wooden cross. Jesus then experienced horrible chest pain as the sac surrounding the heart filled with fluid. The loss of fluid from his tissues had reached a critical level. His compressed heart struggled to pump heavy, thickish, sluggish blood to the tissues, and he struggled to get even one short breath. Jesus not only experienced physical pain, but emotional as well. As he looked up from the cross, he saw his enemies, friends, disciples, and his mother. As Jesus hung on the cross, he heard false accusations and the crowd shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." Jesus never responded out of anger, but always with love and compassion for his enemies. It is finished. Jesus' suffering would soon be over. The common way to end the crucifixion was by breaking the bones of the legs. This kept them from pushing up for breath. The tension could not be relieved from the